Hi everyone, welcome back to the channel. Happy New Year, happy 2023. So just to kick off the year in the right way, I wanted to make a little video on finances. What can we do to improve your finances, financial health in 2023? So before we get into it, I just want to clarify, I'm not an accountant, I'm not an investment banker, I'm not a financial advisor, I'm in no way financially qualified. These are just steps that I have taken or am currently taking to improve my own finances, and I just want to pass that information on to try and help as many people as possible. So what I want to do is to give 3 very clear, concise, tangible points that you can take into the new year, implement straight away, and hopefully see some benefit, some return, so that by the end of the year, maybe partway through the year, we can see a definite improvement in our financial situation. So all that being said, let's get into it. 3 easy steps to improve your finances in 2023. So the first point I want to talk about is clearing down bad debt. In his book, Rich Dad, Poor Dad, Robert Kiyosaki talked about good debt versus bad debt. Bad debt should be cleared as soon as possible, or better yet, don't get into said bad debt. In a very simple way, bad debt takes money away from you, good debt will give you money. I know what you're probably thinking, debt means owing someone money. How can that possibly give me money? Well, we'll get into some of that in some more detail a little bit later on. But first of all, let's talk about bad debt. The most obvious bad debt is credit cards, or more importantly, credit cards that are not cleared fully at the end of the month. They have incredibly high interest rates, which means you are paying more money than what you should be for any goods when you don't pay that money back in full due to the interest rates you're incurring. Now, there are some advantages to using a credit card, such as building a credit score, some of the benefits that credit card providers will allow you to have based on you using their credit card. But we're not going to get into that in too much detail today. We're just looking at the bad debt aspect of credit cards. Credit cards themselves are not good or bad. They're a tool. It's more how you go about using them. So let's imagine a bad case scenario for using a credit card. You have a credit card with a £5,000 limit. On that credit card, you pay 22.9% APR, which is about average on a lot of credit cards at the moment. You can get some which are a little bit lower, some higher. We use that as the average. So you've just moved into a new home. You want to splash out a little bit, make the interior a little bit nicer for yourself. So you buy a new TV, a new sofa, and a new fridge freezer, as an example. Credit card is now maxed out. You've paid £5,000 for all of that stuff, and you are now paying roughly £300 a month back to pay that credit card off. You know that having that debt there is bad. You want to pay it off fairly quickly, so you're throwing some money at it to get rid of it. So by the time you've paid that credit card back, you'll have actually paid back £5,952 by the time that credit card is cleared. So the way to think about this is the goods that you've purchased, are they actually worth £5,952? Would you have still bought them? If you had the cash available, would you have still bought those goods knowing that you're paying an extra £1,000 over what you could have done on the value of those goods? And more importantly, there is another layer to this. So those goods, those items that you're buying, TV, could be clothes, the sofa, whatever it happens to be, those are known as depreciating assets. You're never going to make money on those, they're only going to go down. So not only have you paid out more money than you should have done for that good, that same good is now losing money in the long term. It's never going to make you any money back. It's a depreciating asset. And this is just one example of bad debt. This is the example of a credit card. More commonly, more frequently at the moment, it is finance on clothes. You've probably got a Klarna where you can buy any item you want. When you don't have the money, you can pay in 3 easy installments. That's how they draw people in. If you don't have the money to be buying something, don't buy it. So these have a compounding effect. One credit card leads to, taking multiple things out on finance. Over time, it's very easy to see how your monthly earnings from your salary, from whatever job you're currently doing, suddenly gets diminished very quickly. So your spending power, what you can actually do with that money is suddenly decreasing very, very quickly. So that's bad debt. We need to be clearing that as soon as possible. We need to be throwing money at it to get it gone as quickly as possible, so we're reducing how much money we are paying out in interest in the long term. It's uncomfortable, it's painful, what you want to be doing is going to have to take a bit of a hit, because this is what you need to be doing. You need to be plowing money into this bad debt to get it gone as quickly as possible. But let's have a look at good debt then. How can debt possibly be good for you? Well, good debt in its purest form is taking debt on the basis that whatever asset you're going to be acquiring is going to be making you money in the long term. Now, the simplest version of this is property. It's what people understand quite easily. So the easiest version of this is renting versus owning a property. Okay, so I understand there's different circumstances. Some people actively choose to rent rather than buy, based on their own individual circumstances, where they work, if they travel a lot, they're not settled in one location necessarily. But for most people, I think you probably agree that having a mortgage, owning a property is better for you. And the reason I say that is this: when you pay your monthly rent, that rent is paying your landlord's mortgage on that property, as well as a little bit extra. Okay, so the landlord is making money in two ways. So he's getting the profit from the extra rent that you are paying, so that is money in his pocket that he can do with as he wants. And two, you're also paying his mortgage for him. Now, although he's not getting an immediate financial return on that, he's getting something called capital gains. So the value of that property over time, we know that property tends to increase over the long term. It always has done. Property in this country is scarce and it's only going to be increasing. So he's making money in two ways because you are renting versus saving, getting a mortgage. But let's take it a step further. So let's imagine you're very financially savvy, you've been successful in business, you've managed to accrue a fair bit of money over a 10 to 12 year period. Let's call it £100,000 just to keep the maths fairly straightforward. So this person currently owns his own property. He's accrued £100,000 over a 10 to 12 year period. And he's now looking, okay, well, I've got this money here. How can I get that money to make me more money? That's the bottom line here. How can we make our money earn us more money? So he starts to weigh up. He starts to look at what are his options. So option one, he could buy a property outright. £100,000 is not going to be anything particularly massive in this country. Let's assume, just to keep things simple, he could get a one-bedroom flat and rent it out for, say, £700 a month. Again, the maths in this one, I'm sort of eyeballing. These aren't exact, please don't use them as exact figures. So with his one property, he's making £700 to £800 a month rent. He's paying for his estate agent fees out of that. And he's making about £500 profit. He doesn't have a mortgage, he's paid it off completely, he owns it outright. Now for most people that seems, that's quite a good little earner. Extra £500 a month for next to nothing. He's got his estate agent managing the property for him. So this is where this individual could leverage his money by taking on additional debt. He could use the bank's money, provided his affordability is correct. He could take his £100,000, divide it up into 5, so he now has 5 £20,000 deposits for 5 different properties. So instead of the one property now, he goes for 5 near enough identical properties, one-bedroom flats, let's call it that. So let's assume then that he charges £800 rent per month on each of these properties. If we subtract the estate agent fees as we've done for the first property, and then we subtract the potential mortgage fee, which we'll call £400 a month for argument's sake. On each property then, he's then making £200 profit versus the £500 profit on the one. The difference is he now has 5 of these. So his potential earnings have gone from £500 a month to £1,000 by leveraging his money, taking on some debt, and maximising his returns in the long term. And there's an added layer to this. So previously when I mentioned that when you're renting, you are both paying into the landlord's pocket, but he's also appreciating that asset through capital gains. So the landlord in this situation, not only is he making money in the short term through cash, through his rent, so it's £1,000 a month there, he's then also gaining the benefit of 5 mortgages being paid off via capital gains. So if he ever sells those properties further down the line, retirement for example, he's got a very nice retirement pot sitting there waiting for him. Or he holds on to those properties, continues to rent them in the long term, the rent goes up over time and it pays for his retirement. So those are just some examples of good debt versus bad debt. The point to get across here is not all debt is bad debt. It's up to us to realise what is good, what is bad. And the takeaway message is, even if we get rid of good debt to begin with, let's look at bad debt. Let's clear it down as quickly as possible. Let's use as much of our expendable income as we can. Let's reduce our wants, those luxury items we don't necessarily need to be buying at any one particular time. Get rid of the bad debt to free up more spending power in the long term. We've established that bad debt eats into our earnings. It eats into our potential to use our own money for what we want to be doing, whether that is purchasing those goods correctly without taking on debt, without financing, whether that is going on holiday, whether that is investing, which we'll get onto shortly. Now, more often than not, the reason that people take on bad debt, aside from purchasing items, is actually just because of life. Now, Life has a funny way of forcing us to take on debt, whether that is a vet bill, whether that is your car breaking down, whether that is your washing machine breaking. These are things we've all experienced, and unfortunately we have to pay up for them. It's not an option, these are items we need. I need a car to go to work. If I don't work, I don't earn money. If I don't earn money, I have bigger problems. It's not an option that I have to spend out for that, it's just how do we go about that. Now, when there's a big expenditure, more often than not, people don't have the funds readily sitting there to go. So they take out a payday loan, they put something on a credit card, they finance the option on the repair on the car, whatever that happens to be, it's taking on bad debt, except for you, because you are financially savvy and improving your health and financial situation. So let's say we're at stage 2. We have cleared down our bad debt. We're in a better situation already. What we don't want is to regress back to needing to take out more bad debt. How do we do that? Well, we're now in a position where you should have more free income. You should be in a position where you can go out for meals, you can be saving for that holiday. Please don't give in to that temptation. Imagine that money's just not there. For the past however many months, years, you've been paying off that bad debt, it's now gone. Keep hold of that money. Just start to build what I'm going to call an emergency fund. So our emergency fund is exactly that. It's not for us to dip into when we want that luxury item, it's to sit there and do nothing. We put it into a high interest savings account. It is there for emergencies only. When the car breaks down, when your pet is sick and has to go to the vets, you don't necessarily want to claim insurance, or you have to pay out an advance of insurance. You don't want to be taking out a loan to cover that, even in the short term. Utilise that discipline that you've used to get rid of that bad debt. Let that emergency fund build up. Generally speaking, for most people, anywhere between 3 and 6 months' salary is about right. Now, I'm not a big fan of holding massive amounts of money in savings. Above the 3 to 6 months sort of mark, that money is very susceptible to inflation, which is that money is going to be decreasing in real terms. That being said, the emergency fund, in my opinion, is still very much viable and worthwhile. It just prevents us from regressing and having to take on bad debt again in the long term. If you're finding this valuable so far, please consider liking, subscribing. I'm planning to put these videos out on a regular basis every week. I'm looking to reach a wider audience, obviously, and hopefully make a real difference. So I mentioned in my last point that I'm not a massive fan in holding a large amount of money in savings. As I'm writing this, inflation is hovering around the 10% mark in the UK. It has been higher, but it is currently reducing. So let's talk about some numbers in terms of inflation. So if I had £1,000 saved up in 2021, by the time we hit the end of 2022, the start of 2023, the spending power of that £1,000 would have decreased. So to give you an idea, some quotes from the Bank of England as estimates, £1,000 in 2021, you'd have to spend £1,135 in 2023, the start of 2023, to get the same quantity of goods. So the spending power of that £1,000 has suddenly dropped significantly. That being said, that doesn't take into account interest on high interest savings account, which they can be up towards 5%, so that does mitigate against the inflation slightly. But what if there was a way to get our money to grow outside of purchasing property, starting a business, or relying on interest in savings account? Well, enter the stock market. Now, as I said at the start of the video, I'm not a financial guru, I'm not an investment banker, I'm not a day trader, but I am confident what I do know and what I've researched, and that is compound interest investing. The overall idea of compound investing is to slowly drip feed money into the stock market over the long term. Over time, you'll end up buying shares at a lower price, at a higher price, and this is called dollar cost averaging. So over time, the average price that you're purchasing tends to average out and increase over time. So just to give you an idea, currently share prices are falling. I'm still purchasing stocks, even though I'm fully aware that the value of my money is decreasing. Each time I buy a share, that money is actually decreasing in the long term. The difference is I own that stock. And I'm doing this on the basis that I'm very confident that eventually the stock market will pick up and the value of the investment will increase over time. So the way this works is in 2 ways. One, that stock for that company becomes more valuable. The company increases in value, so therefore the stocks that they hold become more valuable. The stocks that I'm currently holding become more valuable to other investors. The value of my money has suddenly increased. Number 2, companies like to pay dividends to their investors. They will pay some of their profits to their shareholders as a reward for keeping their money invested with their company. So as we can see from this graph, over time, initially, growth is fairly slow, and eventually it starts to pick up momentum. Think of it as a snowball rolling down a hill, okay? It starts slow, it starts small. Over time, it picks up more and more snow, and suddenly becomes this huge snowball just rolling, picking up more and more and more. It's exponential growth. Now, you may well be sitting there thinking, well, Mike, I have no idea what to invest in. Well, here's going to be a shock for you. Neither do I. And the even better news, neither do the people who are paid money to invest money for other people. Investment bankers, day traders, they don't know. Now, what investment bankers and day traders do, they look at short-term trends. How is this stock moving on a short-term, day-to-day basis? And they will bet against that stock either rising or falling. So their job is to buy stock when it's low, sell when it's high, to make that profit for their customers. Now, granted, this can make a massive amount of money, absolutely huge. It also has the added risk of losing loads of money. Now, the almost guaranteed option is to invest into the overall stock market in the long term. It's been proven time and time again by multiple investors who try to, quote, beat the market, and more often than not, they fail. Warren Buffett has said that the most efficient way for the majority of investors to make money is to buy and hold shares in the S&P 500 in the long term. In case you're wondering, this is Warren Buffett, and he is the most successful investor of all time. So you might have heard of the S&P 500. Another example would be the FTSE 100. These are called index funds. FTSE 100 being the top 100 companies in the UK, S&P 500 being the top 500 companies in the US. So when I purchase a stock in the FTSE 100, that is purchasing a portion of a share in the top 100 companies in the UK. This inherently reduces the risk associated with me investing that money, because if one company were to go down, I still have 99 other companies that I'm invested into. It's no guarantee that not all the companies could go under. They could. All top 100 companies in the UK or the top 500 companies in the US could well go under, and you could lose all your money. However, if that were the case, the economy would be in some big problems, and we'd have a lot bigger problems than the fact that we've lost our stock portfolio. So let's talk numbers. We know that the value of savings generally deteriorates over time due to inflation. What can we expect from investing in index funds? So I'll use the S&P 500 as an example, as it's the most well-known index fund. It's the biggest index fund. And we'll look at some numbers. Since its inception, the S&P 500 has returned roughly 10% year on year for the past 100 years. Now, to get the average return of 10%, you might expect 8% on the lower end, 12% on the higher end, and that's not the case. In many years, the average return of the S&P 500 has actually been negative. Money has actually decreased in value over time. That's not surprising, economic growth and reduction over time. However, this has been balanced out by enormous growth in some years of upwards of 20%. And in fact, out of the last 100 years, 70 of those years have been positive growth years for the S&P 500. The take-home message here when looking at compound interest investing is it is long-term. So when you're in doubt, zoom out. What I mean by that is when we look at the performance of an index fund over time, we need to look at the big picture. So looking at this graph, if we're looking at the past year, for example, we can see a definite decline in the value of the S&P 500. I am still investing, and this next graph will show you exactly why. So this is looking at the past 5 years. We can clearly see when COVID hit in 2020, which had a massive impact on share prices. But even then, our exit point in 2022 is still significantly higher than where it was at the beginning of the 5-year period. So what about long term? Let's take a look at the past 40-year performance of the S&P 500. Here we can see the massive growth of the American market. Investing your money long term into an index fund or split across multiple index funds has massive potential to build huge wealth in the long term. So investing these days itself couldn't be easier. There are so many apps available, and they're all incredibly easy to use. There are plenty of options, and it's entirely based on what your preferences are. So some examples for you: eToro, Revolut, Plum, Freetrade, Trading 212. I myself use Freetrade. Again, it is personal preference. I'm not sponsored by them. It is entirely up to you. And so you download an app, you set up your account. There's normally a minimum investment charge. You have to deposit some money to make your account valid. To confirm that you're a real person, you only have to show some form of ID. But it's relatively straightforward. You're good to go after that. So how much you invest can be based on 1, what you can afford, 2, the amount of risk you're willing to tolerate. You don't have to invest in index funds. You could invest into individual companies. You could take the risk, try and find an up and coming company that's going to exponentially grow, and therefore your money will grow but there's likely more associated risk. To time with that is also your timescale. So I'm investing on the basis that I'm investing in the long term. So I don't need to tolerate as much risk. I'm not looking for that quick return. I'm happy for my money to build up and grow over time. And again, this is an investment, and you need to understand that your money value could decrease as well as increase. So there we have it. 3 easy steps to improve your financial health in 2023. Number 1, reduce down bad debt. Number 2, establish your emergency fund anywhere between 3 and 6 months. And number 3, once those 2 are in place, not before, start investing in the long term. Index funds are by far and away my favorite. They're the simplest to understand, and you can see your money growing in front of you. So I really hope you found this useful. I'll be looking to put out more financial videos in the future. Anything from reducing your outgoings to developing a budget planner. I may even release my own budget plan in the future just to help you get started. 2023 is here. Let's get strong, healthy and wealthy. See you on the next one.